My name is Karen, and I'm 25 years old. 6 months ago, my grandfather, who raised me, passed away. Today, the lawyer will open his will. I was visiting my grandfather's house with my sister, Susan, who is 4 years older and my only family. Our parents died in an accident 20 years ago, and since then, our grandparents raised us. After my grandmother passed away from an illness a few years ago, my grandfather's spirits declined year by year, and he frequently fell ill. Concerned, I lived in an apartment near his house and often checked on him. "You're a grown woman. It's unbecoming to keep coming back home," my grandfather would say, but he always laughed cheerfully nonetheless. Then one day, as I visited like I usually did, I found him lying in pain at the entrance. Panicked, I called the ambulance, but my grandfather passed away just like that. "Hey, what are you daydreaming about? At least prepare some tea." My sister's voice brought me back to reality. "Right, the lawyer will be here soon," I responded. Heading to the kitchen, I saw Susan lazily stretching out her legs on the mat and yawning. I could still smell her strong perfume even in the kitchen, a bit away, and I made a face. "She's the same as always," I murmured, placing the kettle on the stove. Susan had always cared only about herself. Once she hit her teens, she started dyeing her hair and hanging out with delinquents, always demanding money without working, even when she caused trouble and our grandparents had to apologize on her behalf. She was unperturbed. I, being the quiet one, often dealt with the fallout. She hadn't changed much even as an adult, drifting around with unstable jobs. I knew she had been asking our grandfather for money whenever I wasn't around. It was easy to imagine she would find this all too troublesome if it weren't for the inheritance. "Aw, you must be the lawyer. Thanks for coming today," I heard Susan's high-pitched formal voice, indicating the lawyer had arrived. I hurriedly placed tea leaves into the teapot and headed toward the entrance. "Thank you for coming today." I had met the lawyer at the funeral. His eyes were as kind as my grandfather's, and a lawyer's badge shone brightly on his chest. After offering incense in front of my grandfather's portrait, he took a sip of the tea I served and then took out my grandfather's will. It had been entrusted to him while my grandfather was still alive. The content was as follows. My elder sister Susan was to inherit $20 million in cash, and I, the younger daughter, was to inherit the house and the land it sits on. Upon hearing this, Susan burst out laughing. $20 million in cash for the elder daughter and only an old house for the younger one? How hilarious! It's just right for someone as plain as you. It's not just the house. There's also the land, I retorted. Susan laughed snidely. The value of this land in such a godforsaken place is hardly surprising. I would have preferred cash. I guess Grandpa must have had a soft spot for me after all. I can't deny that I was a bit shocked. I suppose my grandfather wanted me to protect his beloved house and land where he spent his life with my grandmother. A house and land? That's pretty awesome, isn't it? Brian, my boyfriend, exclaimed in surprise after hearing my story. I shook my head, implying it wasn't as great as it sounded. Not really. My sister inherited $20 million in cash. That's more impressive. Saying it out loud, I felt a sense of emptiness, even though I was being modest. Verbalizing it felt like an acknowledgement. Wow, beautiful and rich. She's got the better deal, Brian said insensitively. Realizing his gaffe, he quickly added, "Your comfort means more to me than money, Karen." Brian has been my boyfriend since I started working. We met at a social event, and being of the same age, we clicked well. I introduced him to my grandfather and my sister. While he hasn't proposed yet, I have been considering marriage. Today was our first date in a while, and I ended up telling Brian about my inheritance. I suppose it was because I thought he would become my husband someday. Little did I know I would come to regret this. A few days later, I visited the family home I had inherited from my grandfather. I intended to clean and sort out his belongings. The property was large, but the house was modest. I figured I could manage it on my own. As I looked around the house, I pondered. It's close to my workplace. Maybe I should move here. Living here leisurely with a cat doesn't sound too bad. There would be no rent to pay, and while there might be maintenance costs, I've been working hard and saving, so it shouldn't be a problem. Maybe someday with Brian. Feeling embarrassed at the thought, I shook my head vigorously and rolled up my sleeves to begin cleaning. Just then, I received a call. My sister's name appeared on my smartphone screen. Sis, what's up? Hey, Karen, having fun all by yourself in that old house? My sister seemed to be drunk. She always had a unique way of extending her words, but today it was particularly bad. Are you drinking? It's still afternoon, I pointed out with a sigh. Oh, you're such a goody two-shoes. She sighed exaggeratedly. She had definitely been drinking. I was thinking about moving here eventually, I answered, hoping to end the conversation quickly. Really? I'm enjoying a suite in a luxury hotel right now, my sister said, raising her voice in a somewhat exaggerated way. Guess who I'm with right now? I have no idea. Boring. It's that kind of attitude that'll make Brian dislike you, she taunted. I'm sorry, Karen. I was flabbergasted when Brian's voice took over the line. The sudden intervention threw me off balance, dizzying question marks popping up in my head, but I pushed away my imagination, though a disgusting scenario had already formed in my mind. Surprised. Huh? My sister's mean-spirited voice chimed in. Ever since I introduced him to her, she had found Brian quite a catch. She boasted about how she had been attracted to him since then, knew where he worked because of me, and approached him as soon as he left work. He came along readily when she asked, telling her she was hundreds of times more attractive than me. I listened in stunned silence. Karen, I'm really sorry, Brian's voice again. Tell me it's a mistake, I tried to say, but the words wouldn't come. As a man, I had to take this opportunity. What? I do feel bad about it, but come on, it's impossible to resist a beautiful woman who has $20 million, right? The way he spoke, as if asking me to understand, drained my emotions. I felt a cold sensation like my blood was being drained from me. You know what? I don't need a man like you. I could hear my sister laughing uproariously in the background. The voice on the phone changed back to her. Well, that's how it is. From now on, let's not consider ourselves sisters, okay? I wouldn't want you turning to me just because you're broke. With those words, she ended the call, overwhelmed by emotions that had lagged behind. All I could do was cry out. 5 years have passed since then. I had a cat in my lap, dozing off in front of my laptop. The cat purred contentedly in its sleep. Today was my day off, but I still had a bit of work I brought home. Oh no, this won't get the work done, I said, feeling guilty but having to move the cat off my lap. Just as I reached out, my phone started to ring. An unfamiliar number was displayed. Thinking it could be work-related, I answered the call without any suspicion. Hello? Karen, long time no see. I instantly knew who it was and froze. The distinctive way of speaking was unmistakably my sister's. It's you, Karen, isn't it? I can tell just from your initial hello. After all, I'm your big sister. 5 years had passed, making Susan 34. A smirk formed at the corner of my mouth at her unchanging way of talking. You're just the same. By the way, I came home and there's a hotel standing. Did you sell the house? That's none of your business. Oh, come on, it's quite a grand hotel. Huh, you must have made a good chunk of change. Huh? Getting fed up. I was about to end the call when she started to chatter about her current situation. According to Susan, she had blown through the inheritance in about 2 years. Now she even had a considerable amount of debt. Even Brian, who she's still hanging around with, seemed to be drowning in debt. I was speechless. Honestly, I couldn't care less. So, lend me some money, Susan yelled. I've always wondered why Grandpa distributed his estate that way, I answered calmly. But on the day you took Brian from me and cut ties, I understood. I started talking slowly, recalling the events of 5 years ago, when Brian broke up with me. I was crushed. After crying my heart out, I sat dazed in my room, staring into space. I'm such a fool, I murmured. As large tears began to spill again, my gaze fell on a painting I had made as a child and had gifted to my grandfather. He had framed it and kept it hanging lovingly. Rising unsteadily, I picked up the painting. Grandpa. Nostalgia and loneliness welled up, and tears started to come again. Suddenly, something dropped from the back of the frame. Picking it up, I saw it was a fresh sheet of notepaper addressed to me. I remembered how, when I was little, I used to stick notes on the back of this frame and exchange secret messages with my grandfather. It was like a family journal, knowing that I was to inherit the house. He probably figured I'd find this note. I'm glad I noticed. I shuddered at the thought that I might have missed it. The letter was dated just before my grandfather passed. To Karen. I knew you'd definitely notice this letter. Right now, you're probably wondering why I distributed my estate in such a manner, cash to your sister and an old house and land for you. It may seem like I favored Susan, but that's not the case. Despite any claims of favoritism, I wanted to leave most of my estate to you, who cared for me till the end. I finally understood what had been bothering me. No matter what, Grandpa thought more of me. I was deeply hurt by Susan's words at that time, despite having loved my grandfather more. A kind of jealousy. I continued to read the letter, but Susan would not be satisfied with a regular division, even as her grandfather. I must admit she's terribly greedy. Exactly, Grandpa, I thought. She even took my boyfriend from me. That's what I wanted to tell him in my heart. That's why I arranged it this way. If at first glance Susan appears to have received the better deal, she won't pay attention to your share. The value of this land in our area is continuously increasing due to ongoing urban development. As of the time I'm writing this, it's not worth Susan's $20 million yet, but the value will surely increase in the future. You can live here if you're attached to it or sell it when its value rises enough to make a good profit. All I want is for you to be happy. When I finished conveying the contents of the letter, Susan clicked her tongue and said, "Hag. I lived in that house for a while, but when my marriage was settled, I decided to sell the house. Just like Grandfather's letter said, the land value had risen enough anyway. I'm never lending you money." Susan seemed frustrated, but, as if she had a good idea, she said, "Right. If you want, I can give Brian back to you. So help your sister. It's a good deal, right?" At that moment, I felt something snap inside me. Enough is enough. You've been taken care of by Grandpa, and yet you haven't shown a hint of gratitude. I despise you for that, and you're not my sister anymore. Besides, I'm already married. I don't need Brian, and I don't even want to see his face. Stay out of my life for good. I said what I needed to say and hung up. I quickly set up call blocking. My cat, who had been cowering on the bed, looked up at me with wide eyes. I quickly picked up my cat and said, "I'm sorry." After that, it seems Susan contacted Brian, and they both stormed into our old house. Did they try to return Brian to me? There's a respectable in there now, but they must have misunderstood something and were shouting that they were my relatives, even though I had sold the land and had nothing to do with it. It's simple for those two. They thought Karen sold the land and an inn was built. She must be the owner. Of course, the staff reported them to the police. The two of them were arrested because they had destroyed several items in the inn. Furthermore, it was discovered that they had been committing marriage fraud for money in the past. It seems they'll be sent to prison together. I was also questioned by the police. but I was able to prove that I had no involvement quickly, as we were estranged, and I was released. As my husband, who came to pick me up, and I were walking through the station, we heard screaming and turned our gaze. There were Susan and Brian, looking completely different. Fortunately, they didn't notice us. Both of them had messy hair, worn-out clothes, and looked nothing like the two people I remembered. Especially Susan, who never skipped her makeup and fashion, looked even more different. They were probably being moved to a different location. As I watched the two of them, filled with a sense of melancholy, my husband and I locked eyes. I grabbed the hand he extended, and we left the police station. "Are you okay?" My husband, always concerned, looked at me with gentle eyes. "I'm okay. I have you and this little one," I said, touching my fairly noticeable belly and smiling back. In my belly, a new member of our family was growing. Money is important, but there's something even more valuable. That's what I want to teach our child. With my husband by my side,